The Stellantis CEO is standing there saying, look how great it is that we're investing all these billions of dollars in America. He doesn't seem to care.
Well, it's just one thing after another here. Welcome back to Moose and Loose. My name's David. Today we have a BC court ruling that First Nations have veto power over mineral rights. They have to have a say. This slippery slope of power has now gone to the point where major businesses in Richmond are not going forward. We've got Carney's minister getting absolutely humiliated on CTV. We got a bunch of stuff. Let's jump into this. Starting this episode off, we got Jing Lai posting this. Breaking: Conservative MP Vincent Ho obtained official government documents on all DEI expenditures under the current Liberal government. We got $10.9 million for DEI travel, $43.7 million to fund DEI related positions, $2.67 million for DEI workshops, $1.43 on DEI consultants, $53 million on DEI bureaucracy. What a waste of money. Liberal theft. I didn't give my taxes for this. Yeah, I didn't give my taxes either for this. You know, Canadians working our butts off. They're shoveling our money off for these stupid initiatives. We also got this one from Roman Baber. It says, during Conservatives Canada, we had the wealthiest middle class in the world. After a decade of Liberals, 3 in 10 Canadians must choose between heat or eat. Coming from a Globe and Mail article, forget a recession, what Canadians are living through is worse. Last month, insolvency firm MNP had reported that 3 in 10 Canadians are being forced to heat or eat decisions, reducing spending on utilities or food purchases to save money. When people are cutting back on food, heat, or medical care, it's not just about budgeting anymore, it's about day-to-day survival. This is what the Liberals have done to us. So anyone who's voted for the Liberals in the past now needs to stop voting for the Liberals. Then we can fix this problem once and for all. Moving ahead, we've got the Liberals spent over $1 million on 2 conferences in Montreal last year, including $300,000 in hospitality fees and over $200,000 on meals. How do they spend $200,000 on meals? What are they importing bread from France and pad thai from Thailand? They should be forced to go to a food bank, give that money to those Canadians waiting in line, and then have to eat only things they can find at the food bank. Great suggestion. We also got Barbara Ball reacting to this. Official Government of Canada Foreign Policy Twitter account here posted this ad, and Barbara Ball pointing out how ridiculous it is that a official account is getting community noted here. It says dissenting voices disappearing from your feed, ? It might not be an accident. Some foreign regimes silence critics through takedowns, legal threats, and intimidation campaigns. So that's the ad. What's funny is the community note here. It says Canadian government is currently in the process of drafting Bill C9, which would criminalize forms of protected speech and protest. Wow. This is embarrassing. Our country's an embarrassment. Irony escapes the Liberals. Moving ahead, we've got Donald Trump here commenting on what he spoke with Claudia Sheinbaum and Mark Carney during the FIFA event.
Thank you. What did you talk about with Prime Minister Carney and Mexican President Sheinbaum when you were here just a few days earlier?
Mexico and Canada, we met with the, as you know, I mean, it was pretty well, a lot of people were here, right here we met. And the Prime Minister of Canada, President of Mexico, and we spoke for a half hour. Very good, very productive, talked mostly trade.
Will you restart negotiations with Canada?
Oh, look, I have a great relationship with Canada. They're very tough traders, but I have a very good relationship with the Prime Minister and with Canada.
And you had said you would halt those negotiations earlier after the tariff.
Well, I have halted them.
And so will you restart them?
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you know, the problem is Canada makes a lot of things that we don't need because we make them also. But we'll work it out. Canada's a special place, and they really are good at ice hockey, aren't they?
Mr. President. That's a bizarre way to end that question. We're good at ice hockey. We'll work it out. When? Seems Donald Trump is a little bit more loose and relaxed right now. I mean, he says one thing one day and then it's another thing the next day. Until a deal is actually signed, you know, I wouldn't assume a deal is going to be worked out. Moving ahead, we got Carney's minister here, Patty Hajdu, getting destroyed on CTV.
It's not just EI. And I would agree with you. Nobody wants to go in EI, but an EI system that's more responsive, that gives more weeks, that doesn't hold back anything, that people can keep their separation pay and their final pay payments is actually important changes based on, years of advocacy from a number of different worker groups, including unions, by the way. But it's not just that. It is actually supports for the incredible training that happens across the country. And you talked about pivoting. So there's additional, there's millions of dollars in Ontario, for example, that's being delivered to workers that are experiencing separation, connections immediately to work training, and connections immediately to new opportunities. These are very, very challenging times. I mean, I have experienced it. I think a lot of Canadians have experienced this kind of disruption. And I come from, by the way, an area that's had deep disruption in the pulp and paper industry over the last decade and a half. So that's only part of it, absolutely. But the other piece of it is that we have to protect these industries as well, because ultimately there are still, 1,700 jobs left at Algoma Steel that wouldn't have been there yesterday if the steel mill closed entirely. That mill would not.
Is she trying to pat herself on the back here? Don't worry, we're doing a good job. We didn't lose all 2,700 jobs, just 1,000 of them. Don't worry, guys. 1,700 still left there. This is not the right tone. It's not the right thing to say. There's 1,000 families now that don't have a primary source of income going through Christmas.
Have been able to bring back different forms of production if they lost the workers that they currently have. So this is about saving the furniture, Vashi, in the steel industry. This is about making sure that we have a steel mill in the next 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years. And this is about making sure that our companies, our Canadian companies, are well positioned to be able to find new markets and create new products. And that's the...
So Canadians are the furniture, trying to save some of the furniture. This is the way she's going to phrase this.
Purpose behind these loans.
But is that the guiding theory, like save the furniture? Because I think of the President Trump, for example, this week, surrounded by the CEOs of auto companies who were supposed to come to the defense of an integrated sector and instead stand next to him in the Oval Office, essentially, groveling, saying how great he is, how great the tariffs have been. Like, I can only imagine how an auto worker would feel looking at that. Is my best hope that that the furniture is saved in the industry? Like,
well,
is that enough?
Look, I think we're talking about two very different industries. And in terms of steel, I can tell you that without a sovereign steel industry in Canada, it's going to be very hard to build Canada strong. So there's an effort to make sure that we have a footprint that's Canadian owned. In terms of other international corporations, I think you've heard my colleagues speak that we're going to get our money back. And that's just...
That's such a joke. We're not getting our money back. Stellantis is taking that $15 billion and they're running right out the door and going right over to America. As they announced, $13 billion they're investing in America over the next 4 years. They ripped us off, and they did it because the Liberals let them rip us off. If there was something written in the clause saying you can't take that money if you don't guarantee the jobs, then we wouldn't have this problem. So now should we be filing a class action lawsuit against Justin Trudeau and now Carney Liberals, suing them for making such a bad deal with our money? I don't think they're getting $1 back from this.
Really think that's true? I mean, the Stellantis CEO is standing there saying, look how great it is that we're investing all these billions of dollars in America. Well, he doesn't seem to care.
Well, look, I can't speak to what his motivations are, but I can tell you that we're going to stand up for Canadian dollars and we're going to go after that money.
Do you think you're actually going to get it? Like, has there been, like, again, this is another case of sort of money that was extended to this company who is basically laughing in our face. Like, it's
egregious. I agree with you. It's egregious.
But what is the evidence that you're actually going to get that money back?
Well, I think
again, we have no transparency other than the industry minister getting up in QP saying it's going to come.
Look, you'll have to ask her the questions because I don't have the details at hand in terms of what litigation they're going to pursue, but that will be...
So she's telling us that they're going to get the money back, but she doesn't have the details. You can't have it both ways here. At this point, why don't we just get a First Nation band to come in and just seize the land that Stellantis has one of their factories on and just take it back that way? Our country's a complete joke. They take billions of dollars of our money and just give it away for free, and these companies go to America. Then you have Mark Carney fear-mongering Donald Trump, elbows up, and Canadians fall for it and vote for it, and they keep doing this crap over and over. And then people are wondering why things are so bad in this country. Maybe it's time to wake up, guys. The sheep have to wake up at some point and start voting Conservative.
Be our effort. We will make sure that we will do everything in our power to get that money back. But I will go back to Algoma Steel because I think, when we're talking about Canadian companies, whether they're lumber companies, whether they're steel companies, Canadian companies have an important footprint. And we're going to continue to fight for those Canadian companies' viability, because without that, it's going to be very hard to build Canada.
There's no fighting for companies, and no Canada strong. All these major sectors that are getting hammered by tariffs right now are getting nuked. And if CUSMA goes down, then the rest of the 85% that's currently protected is also going to get nuked.
It is strong. And so I'm actually really pleased with the work that we're doing in terms of supporting those essential industries.
That's right. They're so pleased that they gave money to Algoma Steel, which has direct connections to Brookfield. They're not going to bail out other steel companies, but Algoma, they got their back. She's pleased with their work. This is an utter embarrassment. This is next level stupidity. Yeah, you bet it is. Save this sector. It's the modern Liberal Party that destroyed it. Welfare for the management team. Yeah, Algoma CEO still getting his $5.6 million. It's just paying bigger bonuses to these executives. Moving ahead, we've got this one here from the Vancouver Sun. It says BC Court of Appeals rules First Nations must be consulted on mineral claims. This gong show continues, and it continues to get worse. Goes on to say 2 of 3 judges ruled BC courts must honor province's Declaration of Rights and Indigenous People, the DRIPA law that they put in 2 years ago. We got Table Salt also posting this. BC government in full panic mode. Judge strikes down BC mineral rights system, states that all BC must be interpreted consistently with UNDRIP. EB considering passing new law opting out of DRIPA to cut out the courts. What an absolute fail. And we got Caroline Elliott here explaining more on this.
Another massive court ruling in BC, and this one could lead to an overhaul of much of our legal system. The BC Court of Appeal has drastically expanded the role of the courts to allow them to strike down BC laws for inconsistency with the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, known as UNDRIP. Now, much of UNDRIP is inconsistent with many of BC's laws, and it's behind some of the most problematic policies in BC, like the secretive land agreements that threaten our democracy and our prosperity. This ruling means that the court has now given itself the ability to determine whether provincial laws align with UNDRIP, and where that isn't the case, the court will now get to decide what action is required. This undermines our elected government's ability to act in the public interest and could lead to some serious upheaval. For those working in the natural resource sector, this means more uncertainty, less investment, and more job losses. For all of us, that potential lost investment means lower revenues to fund the programs and services we rely on. It's another layer on top of an already unworkable situation in BC. Our government should never have adopted UNDRIP in the first place, because it's fundamentally inconsistent with our existing laws and with our government's ability and duty to act in the public interest. The message I have for David Eby is clear. Repeal your UNDRIP legislation or resign.
Yeah, that's what needs to happen. Both need to happen. Repeal it, and then he should resign. Best he just resign. But in the meantime, we should start a recall campaign and be ready for April 2026. Got this one here. Breaking. Cowichan fallout spreads. We got $350 million in commercial property development in British Columbia loses a construction leader after BC judge ruled that simple fee property title would be subordinate to the new Aboriginal title. So the Cowichan case, we're seeing this massive development here falling through. It says BC property company says it lost its lender, tenant for new development after Cowichan ruling. Talks ended because of the uncertainties and risk allocation issues raised by the BC Supreme Court ruling in August. Just as I said this was going to happen, this is not just going to be First Nations getting a payout from the government and all goes away. There's not enough money for that. This is way too expensive of property, and that's why these freeloaders decided to pick those Richmond properties, because it's worth so much money that they can't be paid out. They will either take the land, they'll get some sort of royalties, they'll start charging property tax to these people, and you're seeing deals fall through because of this uncertainty. Banks would have nothing to do with this. So this article says Montrose, which is a warehouse company, spent $7.5 million advancing the project and expected to borrow another $35 million to complete construction. The company said discussions have ceased for the same reason with companies such as Fortis and Enbridge to develop a facility to capture landfill gas rather than flare it. Those discussions have been underway for 6 years. It's destroying businesses across Richmond right now, and this is going to keep spreading across Canada. These greedy chiefs are destroying this province. This needs to be nipped in the butt right away, all because of what, one activist judge? This whole case needs to be retried by different judges. It goes on to say that this company here bought this land between 18 and 40 years ago. It's developed huge warehouses for Coca-Cola, Canadian Tire, Wayfair. It spent $30 million on managing environmental issues. It spent $300 million to develop the lands and $200 million in mortgages and various lenders. And guess what? The chiefs swoop in. That's our land. Give us all that now. Hoping to get a big payout. Well, there's not enough money to pay this out because this land is worth billions. And if this goes across British Columbia, well, it'll bankrupt Canada. This so-called Aboriginal title that Trump's fee simple title, Canadian title, it needs to be removed off of every piece of legislation, documentation. Otherwise, this province will fall into disrepair. This is going to spread across the rest of Canada to the areas where this does apply, over on the east, also up in the north there. And we have another story here going on. This is over in Ontario. First Nations want to ban development.
2 First Nations communities in remote northern Ontario want the province to permanently protect a large swath of land from any future development.
Under their own laws, Kitchener-Magoosup, Inanunawug, or KI, and Wapakika First Nations have already protected these 3 million hectares of land. Now they want the province to reciprocate.
Land mass this size, it's to protect it for the future.
The area, 600 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, is 48 times larger than the city of Toronto and includes intact boreal forest, wetlands, clean lakes, and healthy rivers.
I mean, this is nice and all. They don't want people going up there and starting new mines. That's essentially what's going on. They don't want any mining up there. Well, then what's the trade-off here? No more First Nation reconciliation payments to these bands? Never again? They never get a dollar? Either you're with Canada and you're bringing prosperity, or you're not going to be a part of it. Well, then you don't get any money. That's how this should work. They can't just keep getting money, but then not contribute to Canada. What kind of clown show are we running here? I mean, look at this other story that's been going on 10 years now. Province buys disputed Grace Inlet for $5.45 million. Why did they do that? Because they'd forced this guy who bought this land in 1990 for $270,000 to sell it because Indigenous claimed that one of their ancestors was buried there hundreds of years ago. So he had to sell his property. This is a bunch of bullcrap. The BC government agreed to pay $850,000 for the inlet at Granges Harbor at Salt Spring Island and $4.6 million for losses suffered by Barry Slosky, who was building a luxury retirement home. He was building his dream retirement home, and he was doing it with Indigenous consent. He was trying to be thoughtful of where he was building things because they were complaining about it. And what happens here? He loses his land. And reason why they were able to get away with this, robbing this guy of his own land, it says kayakers discovered exposed human remains on the inlet in 2006. Archaeologists located at least 16 burial cairns. When they went through it, they found 3 bone fragments and they couldn't figure out who they came from. And then First Nations like, oh, that's our burial site. And the rest is history. Like, this is ridiculous. This case was back from 2015. Like, this stuff has been going on for years. The more I dig into this, the more examples I find of stuff like this. You can see this article here comes a year before him giving up his land. It says owner gives his side on the Grace Inlet issue. After 24 years of ownership of this property, some vocal critics claim that I'm building a home in a known First Nation cemetery. Nothing could be further from the truth. In the heat of the rhetoric, some key facts have been lost. I welcome the opportunity to set the record straight. With the exception of 3 bone fragments, 2 found in 2006 and 1 in 2007, nearly a decade ago, there have been no findings, any trace of human remains anywhere on Grace Inlet. So it goes on to say that they tried to DNA them. They couldn't figure out who they're from. They couldn't prove that they're First Nations, yet First Nations was able to kick this guy off his land and taxpayers had to pay the bill.